Giving exam three times before the last one, it helped me understand what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and what it takes for anyone to crack this exam. That this exam is not just a test of your skills, but it's also a test of your time management and how you can tackle those questions and which questions do you select and which questions do you leave. So this was something which I figured that I need to sharpen it. I need to make it absolutely perfect so that I can face any kind of paper on the D day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Chamomile Tea with Toppers, an initiative by Unacademy, and I'm your host, Rishabh. Today, I have with me on the show Rahul Singhania, who has scored a percentile of 99.8 in the CAT examinations, and he's here with us to discuss about how he was able to achieve this phenomenal percentile. So let's speak to Rahul. Hi, Rahul. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hey Rishabh, thanks for having me here. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm very well. First of all, heartiest congratulations on this wonderful achievement. Tell me, first of all, did you expect a percentile like this?
To be honest, I wasn't expecting any percentile, or I didn't had any expectations on the result day. I knew my score, what I scored based on the response sheet, but I thought that we let's not focus on the percentile. Let's just go with the flow, start preparing for other things, other exams instead of pondering about what your percentile could be.
Right. And speaking of the result day itself, tell me how that was when you received your result and you finally knew that you had got a percentile of 99.8. How was your family reacting to it?
It was a very eventful day. Coincidentally, my mother had baked a cake on that very day. We didn't knew that the results were coming. I was having a conversation with my friend, and I got to know that the results are out. And I was really satisfied with what I scored. And obviously, my parents were really happy. There were wishes pouring in all over from my family, my friends. Everyone was really excited about it.
Well, that's great. So, Rahul, now before we get into the rest of the interview, I'd just like you to tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background.
So, as you know, my name is Rahul. I was born and brought up here in Calcutta. I completed my engineering from Birla Institute of Technology, Mesra in Computer Science, and I graduated in 2019. And I've been working as a software engineer ever since for close to about 2.5 years.
Great. And what do you like to do in your spare time? What are some of your hobbies?
I like to read, play video games, have a conversation with my friends, and sometimes I also like to write, but that's really rare.
Right, Rahul. So you just mentioned in your background that you're from a software engineering background and you've been in the industry for some time now. So tell me how this switch to, a management oriented field came about, because usually you would expect that you would continue in the tech line. So how come you decided to write the CAT and eventually move into this stream?
I think it was there in the back of my mind ever since I joined engineering. So that was the plan. I'd complete my engineering, work in the industry for a few years, gain some real ground level experience as a developer, and then probably move on to a management role where I can contribute to building tech products or managing tech companies. So that was the plan. And this CAT 2021 was probably the first time that I felt that now I've gained enough experience in the industry to move to a newer role or to transition into a management role.
Right. So was it that you always wanted to write the CAT, or did you have some other career option in mind? Because did you have any family members who have written this exam? Any friends, any seniors that you know of who gave you some advice?
So a couple of my friends did write the exam. A couple of my friends, my seniors, they did write the exam, and I got to know about what the exam consists of, or what are the requirements for the exam, or how do you need to prepare for the exam. But I was aware about the exam, or aware about how the entire IM admission process works even before I joined engineering. So I did a bit of research on my own to figure out how things work.
Right. And just tell me, how much of a role did the pandemic play in your preparation? Because of course we're in times of COVID. So just tell me, did that kind of impact your preparation in any way?
So the pandemic, everything has a positive and a negative side to it, right? So even with the pandemic, we were stuck at our homes. You couldn't meet your friends, you couldn't meet your family, you couldn't go out. So that probably brings in you go into a shell, and you probably get demotivated a lot, or there are various opportunities or various places where you in your preparation journey where you might feel dejected or
Demotivated.
just plain lost. Yeah, correct. But the flip side of it is that I didn't need to travel, so I saved a lot of commute time, and I had a lot more energy even after I finished my work. Because otherwise, if you're traveling, if you're commuting, especially since I was there and I used to work in Bangalore, so you know the Bangalore traffic, right? So if you travel for an hour on every day, that really puts in a toll and makes it difficult for you to hit the books after you're done with your work. So I would say there are positives and negatives to the pandemic.
Right, right. That's the right way to look at it. And now tell me, how did you now, because the CAT exam, now you knew that you had to write it. So when you got to know about the whole pattern of the exam, the whole syllabus, what did you think about the CAT exam? Did you feel like this is something that is easy for me? This is something I will be able to crack easily? Or were you intimidated in any way when you got to know about the syllabus?
So I first wrote the CAD exam in 2018. I was just writing the exam to figure out what the pattern is, what are the questions, what are the expectations you have. So I've written the CAD exam thrice before 2021. I've written it in 18, 19, and 20 just to assess where I am, or what kind of effort do I need to put in when I really start to prepare for the exam. So I was pretty much aware of the syllabus, the content, and the pattern. 2020 was a real shocker because it suddenly from a 3-hour exam it became a 2-hour exam. So that adapting into that pattern was really difficult in the 2020 exam. But going for the 2021 exam, I was pretty confident that I have the basics covered. I know the very basics of English. I know the very basics of quant. I know the very basics of logical reasoning. So it wasn't very daunting when I started.
So I would say this was your fourth attempt at the examination, is it?
Yeah, fourth attempt, and first time I wrote it seriously with preparation.
Right, right, absolutely. So now tell me, because now that you've had this experience of giving this exam many times, and you've attempted it for 3 times before this, and now that you've scored this percentile, tell me, what changes did you make, in your preparation? Like you mentioned, this time you were a little more serious than how you were compared to the previous few times. So what was different in your preparation? Was it a change in your daily schedule? Was it a change in the kind of way you were tackling some subjects that were difficult for you? What was that?
So giving exam 3 times before the last one, it helped me understand what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and what it takes for anyone to crack this exam. So like I figured in 2019 that this exam is not just a test of your skills, but it's also a test of your time management and how you can tackle those questions, and which questions do you select and which questions do you leave. So this was something which I figured that I need to sharpen it. I need to make it absolutely perfect so that I can face any kind of paper on the D day. And I also figured that verbal was probably something which wasn't my strong suit, primarily because we engineers are designed to think in some way, right? You use your previous knowledge, you use knowledge from your previous whatever you have learned, and you apply it to the context wherever you are, whenever you are reading something. But verbal requires you to be context free and just focus on what is given there. So verbal probably was the most challenging aspect of my preparation, and I devoted the most time to my verbal prep.
Right, Rahul. So now that we know that you are someone who's given this attempt 3 times before in the past, and now is your fourth attempt, and you've scored this percentile. Just tell me, what kind of changes did you make during your preparation this time? Was it something that you changed your daily schedule in any way? Did you devote more time to any particular subject? Was it that, or was it something else?
So taking CAT 3 times before helped me realize that the CAT exam is not just about your subject matter, but it also is about your test taking skills or time management skills. And this time around, I focus on that. And I also realized that verbal is probably not my strongest suit, or so I focused more on verbal preparation and making sure that I really understand the nitty-gritties of the section. And that is probably which was what made the difference this time.
Right, right, absolutely. And talking about your daily schedule itself, right? a lot of aspirants who will be taking the exam this time in 2022 would definitely want to know from you, someone who scored such a great percentile, what your daily schedule was, right? What was the thing that you were doing on a daily basis? How were you dividing your time between the different subjects? So could you give us a little insight on how that was like?
So my daily schedule used to be I used to attend my office from morning till evening. So, but my office timings were really variable depending on how much work I had. So, but I dedicated a block of time from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. solely for CAT preparation, wherein I would take classes, I would take attempt mock tests, or I would just practice on my own. So I dedicated 1 day for each subject instead of practicing all these subjects on the same day. So one day used to be verbal, the other day used to be LRDI, the third day used to be quant, and occasionally I would take a mock test on the weekdays as well, depending on where I was at the preparation phase. And the weekends were really helpful because 2 days completely on your own, you could study as much as you can, give as much mock tests as you can, practice as many questions as you can. So, but you really need to figure out what your schedule would be. My schedule could be very different from someone else or someone else who's trying to prepare. So you just need to fine tune your what works for you and what doesn't work.
The first step to crack CAT is to know your strength and weakness from an exam point of view. I will teach you how to identify your strengths and maximize your score in Quant and LRDI section. I have scored 100 percentile 5 times and have been teaching for 15 years. So I can tell you the right approach that is required to take your preparation to the next level. My name is Patrick D'Souza and I teach live on Unacademy Plus.
Yeah, absolutely. And what makes this achievement of yours even more incredible is the fact that you were working at the time of preparation. So that's great. What kind of advice would you give to someone who is a working professional like yourself, who's preparing for the CAT? And usually, we see that sometimes people do not end up having the time to manage both or juggle both. So what kind of advice would you give to someone who is also a working professional but preparing for CAT?
As a working professional, it's really important or really significant for you to understand where you can dedicate time. You need to figure out a block of time, let's say 2 hours or 3 hours, where you can solely dedicate it for CAT preparation. It could be early in the morning, it could be late at night, whenever that works for you. But you need to make sure that you stick to that timing throughout your CAT preparation. For me, it was late in the night from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. For someone else, it could be early in the morning. And you need to utilize your weekend very properly. You need to make sure that the 48 hours you have, you spend as much time as you can in your preparation and giving mocks. And weekend also allows you to give mocks and analyze them at the same day, which is probably not possible on the weekdays. So that's pretty much, I think, I'd suggest anyone who is writing the CAT this year.
Right, absolutely. And now we just spoke about mocks, right? You just mentioned mocks while you were talking about your preparation. So tell me, for an aspirant, what should be the ideal number of mocks that they should write while they're preparing for CAT? And how important is it to even analyze these mocks?
So there's no magic number for the number of mocks one should take. For someone, it could be 20 marks. For someone else, it could be 60 marks. But I personally wrote close to 40-45 marks. But you need to make sure that you analyze each and every mock. You need to figure out what your strengths are, what your areas of weaknesses are, what kind of mistakes you're making. Are you nailing those easy questions? Are you avoiding those difficult trap questions where you're wasting a lot of time? So I suggest even if you are writing 20 marks or 10 marks or whatever number of marks you decide, make sure that you analyze each and every one of them so that you extract the entirety of that mark and not let it go waste. So that's just my 2 cents.
Right, absolutely. And with respect to the mocks itself, right, a lot of times when people are writing it for the very first time or during the initial times of writing these mocks, the scores tend to be a little low, right? So people tend to feel a little dejected at that point of time, feel a little demotivated, but that shouldn't really be the point of writing mocks, right? You should eventually get better at it, right? That's the whole approach.
Yes, absolutely. Your first mock score could be very drastic, and instead of being dejected, instead of postponing your mocks till, let's say, August, September, or October, you should just focus on what went right and what did not go right, and then just try to improve one after the other, just nail that one thing which went wrong and make sure that doesn't happen again, and then repeat that through the entirety of your mock season.
Right, absolutely. So Rahul, now let's get into individual subject preparation. Right now, of course, we know that there are the three sections. So let's go by them one by one. So let's start with verbals. Like you mentioned that was one of the more challenging sections for you. So tell me, how did you go about tackling this particular section, and what kind of guidance would you like to give to aspirants who are facing a similar problem like you, who are finding verbal a little difficult? Would you tell them that reading is extremely important, or do you have any other advice for them?
So I was an avid reader even before I started writing the exam, even if before I thought about writing the exam. So reading was not the issue with me. I could read those RC passages really quickly, understand what they're trying to say. But then understanding what the question demands from me was very challenging. And the verbal section was a complete, I was completely alien to the verbal section. Where before the exam, whenever I used to solve any kind of parajumble questions or your odd one out questions, I didn't know that there could be a logical structure to the question, and the question demands a certain kind of logic from me. I feel Unacademy really helped me there because I knew I needed a constant support or a constant guidance throughout my entire preparation journey, and I explored some of those free classes at Unacademy, and I realized that some of the educators are really good here, and I can probably learn from them, and it also helps me create a habit. Otherwise, I'd always fall back to my favorite subjects, quant and logical reasoning, and not work on verbal. So having a routine and having a structured preparation approach for your verbal journey is very necessary. And like you said, having a reading habit really helps.
Right, absolutely. And what about the quant section? Like you mentioned, that was a little one of your favorite subjects there. So how was the preparation for that? How did you go about preparing for quants?
So every engineer is very somewhat comfortable with the quant subject because you've already approached those, tackled those questions when you were writing your engineering entrance exams. So I was pretty much comfortable with the syllabus, and what I did was just go through the entire a book called Arun Sharma by the author Arun Sharma, and I went through all the formulas and the concepts once before I started my preparation, and then I just used to solve questions from previous mocks or previous year CAD papers, and just figure out what kind of concepts I'm missing, or is there any thing which I need to brush up from my engineering days or from my +2 days. And whenever I used to write mocks, I used to figure how many quant questions was I able to solve, how many quant questions was I not able to solve, was it a conceptual issue, or whether I couldn't manage time. So quant really didn't demand a lot of my time, but essentially through previous year mocks and through your current mocks was what I did for the quant section.
Right. And what advice would you give to somebody whose quant section is a little weak? How can they get better at this particular section?
I'd say you start from the very basics, and if you know that your quant section is not your strongest suit, start early and revise all those concepts because you've already probably learned them at some point in your life. So just revise those concepts and start solving the easy questions first. Don't just jump into the most difficult questions you can find. First, familiarize yourself with the concept, familiarize yourself with the formulas, and solve those easy questions, and then move on to the more difficult questions. And don't be demoralized by what you score in your quant mocks, because you know eventually you'll get better if you just work on your areas of strengths and figure out your weaknesses and just constantly be at it.
Right, absolutely. And now talk to me about your LRDI section. How was that for you?
The LRDI section was probably my favorite section of all because it helped me exercise my brain. And as a programmer, I always learn. You love to solve puzzles, you love to solve those riddles, so to speak. So for the LRDI section, I didn't do a lot. I just had an aim of solving about 300 to 400 sets by the time the CAD exam was over, and that sets could be from any kind of book, any kind of previous year mocks, or any kind of material that you can find online. So just be aware of the different kinds of questions that can come on the exam, and have a target number of sets that you would like to solve by before you write the actual exam, and just stick with the process.
Right. And Rahul, coming back to the mocks itself, right? What were some of the sources that you were referring to when it came to the mocks? So where were you giving these mocks?
So I used the three big mocks, as you say, time, IMS, and CL. But I primarily used the time and IMS mocks because there were plenty of enough mocks there. And this is something which I learned while preparing, that whatever mock series you choose, make sure that you attempt all the mocks in that series. So if that particular company has 20 mocks, so make sure that you give all those 20 mocks and don't attempt 10 mocks from here, 5 mocks from there, 3 mocks from some other place. Because what those people who are setting those mocks are trying to do is they are trying to make sure that all the different kinds of scenarios that can be expected in a CAD exam is covered in their mocks. In some mock, your verbal section could be difficult. In some mocks, there could be more questions from geometry. In some other mocks, your DILR questions could be really easy. So you need to cover all those n different scenarios which you can face in the exam, and make sure that. So that's why it's very important to stick to one mock and complete it to entirety instead of scattering your mocks. So I'd suggest choose any one or two mocks which you feel you are comfortable with, or which you feel is very popular, and then just stick to the entire schedule.
Right, absolutely. And with regards to my next question, I just divided into three parts, Rahul. I just want to know from you, for example, now you are preparing for the CAT examination, right? And you know that the examination is now nearing. So let's say now we are 1 month away from the CAT exam, right? So where do you think at this stage an aspirant's preparation should be? What level should he be prepared at? So that is my first question. And secondly, 1 week prior and 1 day prior to the exam, what kind of mindset should you have while going into the exam?
So if you're 1 month into the exam, you should be really aware of your strengths and weaknesses. There shouldn't be any topic which you are not which you don't know about, or which you don't know that whether you are going to attempt that topic in the exam or not. And at this point of time, there's not a lot of time for you to work on your weaknesses or improve those small weaknesses that you have. So you just need to focus on your strengths at this point, and make sure that you're not missing questions from your areas of strength. So the last 1 or 2 months are probably is the month where you take the most number of mocks. So make sure that you're not missing those questions from your areas of strengths. Make sure that you're not missing those easy questions, and I think the rest will take care of itself. And to answer the second part of your question, 1 week before the exam or 1 day before the exam. So a week before the exam, don't just. A lot of people stress about the percentiles, or what kind of percentile did they score in their last mock. I wrote 2 mocks in the last week of my preparation, and in the last mock, I remember I scored a 98.3. But instead of worrying about what my percentile was or what would happen on the D day, I was just focused on did I miss any questions from my areas of strengths, and was I able to really solve those easy questions or not. So if those things are in place, then you don't need to worry about what will happen on the D day. 1 day before the exam, just get into those activities, any kind of activity which you are into. If you are into sports, go play that sport. If you are into movies, just watch a movie. Don't stress about the exam. Just make sure that all your exam peripheries are in place, your admit card, whatever you need for the exam day, and then just relax. Spend time with your friends, your family, and then just don't stress.
Right. So very important to keep a calm mind 1 day before the examination. And now talking about the D day, right? The examination day. Now that you've reached the center, or now that you have the paper in front of you, talk to me how that experience was for you. Now that you saw the paper in front of you, what kind of paper attempting strategy, if any, had you made for yourself when you saw that particular paper in front of you?
So when I was sitting in the exam center, and I think it was 5 or 10 minutes left for the exam to start, I was just revising my ideal attempt strategy for the exam. So how I usually go about it is that in the verbal section, I first attempt the verbal questions and then tackle the RC questions. And for the DILR section, I spent 3 to 4 minutes figuring out which sets I will solve. And in the quant section, I just go for it. I didn't had any strategy. Some people used to deploy that 1 round or 2 round strategy. I didn't had any kind of strategy like that. I just used to go for it. So I was just revising my strategy and any kind of fallback do I need to make. If the verbal questions are really difficult, I'll immediately switch to the RC passages. If the RC passages are really difficult, what kind of questions would I solve? So I was just revising all of that in my head, and then as the paper started, luckily it felt in my way, and the paper was structured, or the difficulty was as that I expected, and the verbal questions were doable. So I tackled the verbal questions first, then went on to the RC questions, and then so on for the next 2 sections as well.
So now we've discussed about your preparation. We've discussed about individual prep strategy, your daily schedule, the number of mocks that you gave. Now let's move to the next segment on this interview, Rahul, in which we have some questions from the audience, right? Some of them who are watching this live and some who have sent in their questions. So let's take a few of those questions. You can probably answer them in brief. So I'll just read out those questions one by one to you, all right? What are the things one should avoid during preparation?
I think the first and foremost thing is like looking for too much advice. What works for me might not work for you. What works for me might not work for someone else. So just figure out what works for you and stick to your process instead of worrying about how many marks to give, or what kind of books do I need to refer to, or what kind of materials do I need to refer to. Just try to understand how you would want to tackle the exam. And the second thing to avoid is to not worry about your percentile a lot. There are times where you could score a 60 percentile or 80 percentile, and there are times where you could score a 99.9 percentile as well in your marks. So don't be elated or don't be stressed about it. Just keep a calm mind and just figure out what you learn from each mark, and just go about it, and don't look for too many answers.
Right. All right. Great. How is your preparation for your GD and PI coming up?
So I'm just focusing on the current affairs and my past academics, and revising what I do here at work. So that's pretty much what I'm doing right now, and hoping to see how I can ace the interviews.
Okay. What are the right things to do just before the exam?
So the foremost thing is to revise whatever you've learned in the last week, or just 2 days before the exam. Just if you are into the habit of making notes, revise whatever you have learned so far. One thing which I consciously used to do is keep track of all my mistakes that I've committed, any kind of conceptual mistakes or any kind of silly mistakes that I made during my mocks. So I spend the entire week revising those mistakes to make sure that I don't do those repeat those same mistakes during the CAD exam. And apart from that, there's nothing really which you need to focus on. Just revise whatever you've learned, and revise from your mistakes at least once before you go for the exam.
Right, great. What was the most difficult topic for you personally while preparing for the CAT, and how did you go about cracking it?
The most difficult topic for me was geometry, because geometry requires you to know a lot of theorems, a lot of formulas, and to keep a lot of things in mind, and the syllabus itself is very vast. So instead of worrying too much about it, or losing my mind over it, what I did was I figured what are the areas of my strengths in the entire geometry section, and what are my areas of weaknesses. I figured that mensuration was a topic that I really liked, or any kind of topic which didn't require me to memorize a lot of formulas or theorems was something which I was really good at. So I used to focus on those topics, or those portions of the portions in the exam, and then for the rest of it, I used to stay away from it, or probably leave those questions in any of the mock tests and in the actual CAT exams.
What are the most important topics for CAT preparation that you think an aspirant should focus on?
I'd say I'd go subject-wise. So in the VARC section, in the verbal ability section itself, focus on para summary. A lot of aspirants, what they tend to do is, since para summary carries a negative marking to it, they only focus on para jumbles and odd one out, because those are theta questions and they don't carry any negative marks. So they feel that even if they mess up a question, there's nothing to lose. But what they don't understand is they're losing the time that they spend on those questions. And para summary questions are essentially your RC questions, but the RC passage is really short, right? So in the verbal ability section, focus on parasummary more than your para jumbles and odd one out. For the RC section, there's no one particular topic to it, but figure out what kind of what are your topics of interest. For someone, it could be economics. For someone else, it could be technology, biology, anthropology. So figure out what are your areas of comfort and your areas of areas where you are slightly uncomfortable and would like to avoid that topic, and focus on those areas of comfort first before you fine tune your areas of weaknesses. For the DILR section, I won't say there is any particular topic which is very important. Arrangement is probably, I think, the only topic which comes almost in every mock or in every exam, I'd say. So nail that. And in the quant section, arithmetic, algebra, and geometry are the three pillars of those pure quant sections. So you need to be strong in at least two of them. So for me, it was arithmetic and algebra. For someone else, it could be any of the combinations. But make sure that you nail those two sections, and your third section, you can probably choose what kind of questions do you want to attend and what not to attend.
Right. Thanks for sharing that. The last question is, what is the revision strategy for CAT exam? How much important is it to revise when it comes to the exam?
Like I said, you need to revise from mistakes more than whatever concept. So 1 month into the exam, you can probably start your revision, figure out what you've learned so far, just revise your notes, and keep revising your mistakes, as many mistakes as you can. So you can revisit your mocks that you gave and figure out what questions went wrong. Try to solve those questions again and see, are you able to solve them or not? So I'd say revision, you can start your revision from the last month or last month, and just not worry about to revise the entire thing, but first focus on what your mistakes are, and then move on to any other topic would you like to revise.
All right, Rahul, thanks for answering those questions, and I'm sure that it will definitely help the aspirants out there who have asked these questions, and really important FAQs there, so thanks for that. Now let's move to our next segment, Rahul. This is a fun segment here on CTwT, which we call the rapid fire round. Of course, now we've discussed the serious bit of it, but now let's get into a little bit of fun. I'll be asking you 5 quick questions, and let's see how your answers are going to be. So let's begin. All right?
Yeah.
Your first question is, if an autobiography were to be written on you, on your life, what would the title of that autobiography be?
I'm going to steal Sachin's answer and say Playing It My Way.
Okay, that's great. What is that one movie that you can watch over and over and again, and why?
The Dark Knight. I really enjoyed the entire plot line and the character writing of Joker, and obviously Heath Ledger played it really, really well. So that is something which I can watch anytime.
Yes, it's a truly wonderful cinematic experience there. And now, if you were given a time travel machine, right, would you like to go in your past, or would you like to see what's happening in the future?
I'd certainly like to go in the past. The time when we first figured out how to start a fire is probably where I'd go first.
Great. If there was any celebrity or personality that you would like to meet in person, who would that be and why?
So I'd say I'd like to meet Elon Musk. I read the biography of that guy, and he's someone who has really great ideas for our future. So I'd like to have a conversation with him.
Great. And your last question is, what is your most prized possession?
My most prized possession is something which I bought recently. It's an Xbox, and I enjoy playing games on it a lot.
All right, Rahul. So that was a great rapid fire round. Now, getting into our last segment of this interview. Of course, now that you've secured this awesome percentile, what are your future plans now? Of course, now you're preparing for your GD and TI, but do you have any dream colleges in your list?
I do have certain colleges which I prefer to the top IIMs and your FMS. But right now I'm just focusing on the GDPI preparation part of it instead of focusing on the college, and then figure out once the results are out, figure out where I want to go.
Right. And all the very best to you for that, and hope you get the dream college of your choice. So Rahul, just to close out this interview, I'd like you to give a message to all the aspirants who will be attempting this examination in 2022. What is that one motivational message that you'd like to give them?
So I'd just like to say that keep reminding yourself why you started off, because it's very easy to forget why you started preparing for the exam. And make sure that you keep reminding yourself why do you need to crack this exam, and just use that as the motivation you need to crack the exam or to work hard for it from the point you start till the point the exam is done.
Right. Thanks, Rahul, for that wonderful message. Lastly, would like to know from you, how was your experience being on CTwT?
It was great. Even though we are doing this virtually, it didn't feel that it's very impersonal. So virtual meetings tend to be a bit impersonal, right? But this has been really wonderful, and the questions were really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish we could really do this in person, but the circumstances prevent us from doing so. But nonetheless, we've had a great conversation with you, Rahul, and thanks for being with us here on CTwT and sharing your journey with us. And like I mentioned before, all the very best in terms of your GDPI preparation as well as getting your dream college.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
So that was Rahul here, who joined us here on CTwT and shared his journey, very inspirational one. And we will be back soon with another episode just like this one. Until then, take care of yourselves and stay safe.